I wasn't supposed to be home yet. That was the whole reason I heard it. I'd come back earlier than planned because my flight landed ahead of schedule, and I didn't bother texting anyone. I figured I'd drop my bag, grab a shower, and deal with family small talk later. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet reset before I had to think about my next assignment. The house was louder than I expected. Not shouting, just voices carrying. The kind that drift when people think they're alone. I left my duffel by the door and walked toward the kitchen. Halfway down the hall, I slowed without really knowing why. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was the same feeling I get when something doesn't line up and my body reacts before my brain does. Lauren's voice came from the den. My sister's. Casual, too casual. I wasn't trying to listen. I just did. She laughed short and dry like she was checking something off a list. Then she said it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just matter of fact. She won't be driving after this weekend. There was a pause. Whoever she was talking to didn't answer right away. Lauren filled the silence. It's handled. I took care of the car. She didn't sound angry. She didn't sound emotional. She sounded relieved. I stopped walking. My hand was still on the wall like I'd leaned there for balance. The house felt normal around me. The fridge hummed. A clock ticked somewhere. Nothing about the moment looked dangerous. That's what made it worse. I waited for a follow-up, a joke, a correction, something that would pull the sentence back into normal territory. It didn't come. Lauren kept talking, her voice low, steady. I'm done worrying about it. After this, it's not my problem anymore. That was it. No details, no explanation, just enough to make my stomach tighten in a way I recognized. I didn't step closer. I didn't step back. I stayed exactly where I was and listened to the sound of my own breathing, slow and controlled. Years of training will do that. You don't gasp. You don't rush. You collect information. I told myself there were other explanations. I ran through them automatically. Car trouble, a metaphor, a dumb exaggeration that didn't land right. But none of those explanations matched her tone. Lauren wasn't guessing. She wasn't venting. She was done. I moved before she finished the call. Quietly, no footsteps, no door noise. I picked up my duffel and slipped back out the way I came in. The front door closed behind me with a soft click, the same way it always does. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. Late afternoon, clear sky, nothing unusual. My car sat in the driveway where I'd left it exactly as expected. Same tires, same angle, same dull layer of dust on the hood. I stood there longer than necessary looking at it. People think danger announces itself. Sirens, raised voices, obvious threats. In my experience, it almost never does. It shows up wrapped in routine. It hides inside familiar places. I unlocked the car, but didn't get in. Instead, I leaned against the door and stared across the street, letting my thoughts line up. I didn't feel panic. That came later. What I felt then was irritation, not at Lauren, at myself, because part of me wanted to ignore it, to chalk it up to family drama and bad timing. That part of me had been wrong before. Growing up, Lauren was always the loud one, the one who stayed. I was the one who left. College, training, deployments. I learned early that distance makes people uncomfortable, especially when they think you're choosing it over them. She never liked that I joined the military. She said it like it was a phase, like I'd grow out of it and come back home eventually. When I didn't, she stopped bringing it up and started making jokes instead. About how I didn't understand real life anymore. About how I was always gone when things actually mattered. I used to laugh those off. Standing there in the driveway, I wasn't laughing. I pulled my phone out and opened my messages. Nothing new from her, nothing unusual, just normal family chatter from earlier in the week. Dinner plans, a reminder about trash pickup. Lauren asking if I'd be around this weekend. I locked the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. If I was wrong, the worst thing that would happen was an awkward conversation. If I was right, the worst thing was a lot worse than that. I didn't confront her. That wasn't hesitation, that was discipline. You don't tip your hand when you don't know the full picture. I circled the car once slow, looked at the tires, the hood, the ground underneath, nothing obvious. That didn't mean anything. The most dangerous problems don't announce themselves. My neighbors were out walking their dog. Someone across the street was loading groceries. Normal, ordinary, the kind of setting where people get hurt because they assume nothing bad could happen there. I stood up straight and unlocked the car again. My hand rested on the door handle. I didn't pull it open. Instead, I stepped back and closed the door lock again. I thought about how many times I'd driven this car without a second thought. Early mornings, late nights, long drives on muscle memory alone. I thought about how trust works, how you don't notice it until it's gone. I walked back toward the house just far enough to grab my keys from the table inside, then left again. Lauren was still talking when I passed the den, still relaxed, still confident that the version of the day she was living in was the only one that mattered. I didn't let her see me. Back outside, I sat on the curb for a moment and rested my elbows on my knees. The concrete was cold through my jeans. It helped me focus. I wasn't angry yet. Anger makes people sloppy. What I felt was something steadier, a sense that a line had been crossed somewhere I hadn't known existed. I pulled my phone out again, scrolled, and found the number I was looking for. I didn't rush the call. I waited until my voice sounded normal before I tapped the screen. The car stayed right where it was, quiet and unassuming, like it had always been. The phone rang twice before it went to voicemail, and I hung up without leaving a message. That wasn't a test, it was me buying time. I slid my phone back into my pocket and stayed on the curb, eyes on the car, letting the noise of the neighborhood pass through me. A lawnmower started 2 houses down. Someone laughed. A door slammed. The world kept working just fine without acknowledging what I'd just heard. I told myself I was being dramatic. That's what people say when they want to feel reasonable. I ran through the sentence again, word by word, like a replay. You slow down, hoping to find a harmless angle. She won't be driving after this weekend. That could mean a lot of things. Repairs, a trade-in, a dumb threat that wasn't meant to land. I took care of the car. That one stuck. People who talk like that don't mean oil changes. They mean finality. They mean something has already been done. I stood up and brushed the grit off my palms. My legs felt steady. My thoughts did not. I walked to the end of the driveway and looked back at the house. The blinds in the den were half closed. Lauren's silhouette moved once, then disappeared. I imagined her smiling at whoever was on the other end of that call, satisfied, like she'd just crossed an item off a list. I didn't want to believe that version of her. I'd spent years defending Lauren to other people. Family does that. You sand down the sharp edges when you talk about them. You explain context. You translate behavior into something easier to accept. Lauren had always been intense. She felt things loudly. She didn't like losing control of a situation, and she didn't like feeling overlooked. When our parents passed, she took charge of everything without asking. Paperwork, decisions, the house. I let her. I was gone most of the time anyway. That worked until it didn't. I remembered the last argument we'd had months earlier. Nothing explosive. Just a disagreement that went on too long. She'd said I didn't understand what it was like to stay. I'd said staying wasn't the same as being trapped. That one landed wrong. She went quiet after that. The dangerous kind of quiet where people stop arguing because they've decided something internally. I shook my head like that would reset things. The easiest move would have been to get in the car and leave. Drive somewhere public. Park. Calm down. Prove to myself that nothing was wrong. I'd done that kind of self-check 100 times before. I didn't do it. Instead, I walked around the car again, slower this time. I crouched and looked underneath, not because I expected to see something obvious, but because my hands needed something to do. The pavement was clean. No leaks. No broken pieces. Everything looked normal. That meant nothing. I straightened up and leaned against the hood. The metal was cool, solid, familiar. This car had taken me through years of early mornings and late nights. Long drives where my mind went blank in the good way. I trusted it because I'd never had a reason not to. Trust is efficient. It saves time. It's also fragile. I thought about calling a friend, someone neutral, someone who didn't have a stake in my family dynamics. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped on a name, then kept going. I wasn't ready to say the words out loud yet. Saying them would make them real. Inside the house, Lauren's voice rose briefly, then dropped again. The call ended. A door opened. Footsteps crossed the den. I moved away from the driveway and stood near the fence, out of sight. Lauren stepped onto the porch and stretched like she'd just finished something productive. She checked her phone, typed quickly, then smiled to herself. Not a big smile, a small one, the kind you don't notice unless you're looking for it. She went back inside without looking toward the driveway. I waited a full minute before I moved. When I did, it wasn't toward the car. It was toward the side yard, where the gravel crunches under your shoes if you're not careful. I placed my feet deliberately, avoiding noise the way you do when you don't want to announce your presence. I wasn't sneaking, I was observing. From that angle, I could see the back of the house, the kitchen window, the garage door. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had. There was no sign, no warning label, no obvious threat marker. That's how real problems work. They don't come with labels. I walked back to the driveway and stood between the car and the street. I tried one more time to give Lauren the benefit of the doubt. I pictured her talking about selling the car, about arranging a repair I didn't know about doing something impulsive but not dangerous. None of those explanations matched the calm in her voice. I unlocked the car again and opened the driver's door. The interior smelled like coffee and old upholstery. Normal. I slid into the seat and closed the door behind me. My hands rested on my thighs. I didn't touch the ignition. From that position, everything felt different. The windshield framed the world the way it always had, but my relationship to it had changed. I imagined pulling out of the driveway, braking at the corner, slowing at the light. I imagined nothing happening. I also imagined what would happen if something did. I shut the door lock, opened it again, and stepped back out. The sound felt too loud in the quiet afternoon. I closed the door gently and locked it. I wasn't ready to call the police. I wasn't ready to accuse my sister of anything. I wasn't even ready to say I was scared. What I was ready to do was stop pretending that curiosity was the same as caution. I pulled my phone out again and typed a short message to Lauren. Something neutral, something safe. Hey, I got in early. Everything good? I sent it. And watched the screen until it showed delivered. No typing bubble appeared. That didn't mean anything. It also meant everything. I leaned against the car and folded my arms. The sun dipped lower, throwing long shadows across the driveway. The house felt farther away than it had 10 minutes earlier. I checked my watch. I had time, not infinite time, but enough to make a decision that didn't rely on hope. Lauren's reply came in a minute later. All good. Why 2 words, no punctuation, casual, dismissive. I stared at the message longer than necessary. If she was lying, she was good at it. If she wasn't, then I was standing in my own driveway acting like a paranoid stranger. I locked the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. The choice in front of me was simple and uncomfortable. I could get in the car and trust that family drama stayed in the realm of words. Or I could assume that words sometimes point to actions people don't want to name. I reached into my pocket again, not for the keys this time, but for my phone. I scrolled past Lauren's name and stopped on a different contact one I hadn't used in a while. The kind you keep for practical reasons, not emotional ones. My thumb hovered for a second, then pressed call. I stayed standing between the car and the street while it rang, my body positioned like it was already protecting something even if I couldn't yet say what. The call connected and I turned my back to the house without thinking. Yeah, a man said on the other end. No greeting, just awareness. It's Emily, I said. I need a favor. There was a pause, the kind where someone is deciding whether this is going to be complicated. You okay? I will be, I said. I need a tow. Another pause, shorter this time. Where's the car? In a driveway it shouldn't be sitting in. Is it drivable? I'm not finding out. That was enough. I can be there in 40. Make it quiet, I said. He gave a short laugh. You always were. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. My heart rate hadn't changed. That wasn't confidence. That was training doing its job. People think military training turns you into something aggressive. What it really does is strip away your need for reassurance. You learn to make decisions with incomplete information and live with them. You learn that hesitation costs more than action. I walked to the side of the house and sat on the low retaining wall near the flower bed Lauren never watered. From there I could see the front window and the driveway without being obvious. I wasn't hiding. I was positioning. Inside the house moved the way houses always do. Cabinets opened, a chair scraped. Someone turned on the sink. No alarms, no sudden shifts. If something was wrong, it was already done. I thought about the first time a training instructor explained threat assessment. He said danger doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like a routine you've seen 100 times. Sometimes it looks like a person you've known your whole life. You don't wait for confirmation, you wait for patterns. Lauren had been calm, not defensive, not curious. Calm people don't talk about ending problems unless they think they already have. I checked my watch again. 25 minutes. I stood up and walked the perimeter of the driveway, scanning the street. No one was paying attention to me. That was good. Attention is noise. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it right away. When I did, it was Lauren again. Everything okay out there? Like I was the one out of place. I typed back without thinking too hard. Yeah, just stretching my legs. The reply came fast. Dinner soon. I locked the phone and exhaled through my nose. Dinner. Like nothing had shifted. Like we were still operating on the same version of reality. Military training doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you allergic to coincidences. I walked back to the car and leaned against the trunk, arms crossed. From this angle, I could see my reflection in the back window. I looked normal, calm, someone you wouldn't worry about. That's how I wanted it. The tow truck turned onto the street without lights, just a quiet engine and a slow roll. It passed the house once, then circled back and pulled up behind my car. The driver stayed inside for a moment, scanning. I stepped forward and raised one hand. He got out and nodded like we were meeting for coffee. Evening, he said. Thanks for coming, I said. He looked at the car, then at the house. You want to do this now? Yes. He shrugged. Your call. While he set up, I stayed near the curb, my body angled so I could see both him and the front door. The metal clinked softly as he worked. The sound carried, but not enough to draw a crowd. The front door opened. Lauren stepped out, phone in hand, eyebrows raised like she was watching a movie she hadn't bought a ticket for. What's going on? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I let the tow cable tighten. The car shifted slightly, the sound unmistakable. I'm moving it, I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Why maintenance? She laughed, short and dismissive. You're being dramatic. Maybe, I said. She took a step closer. You didn't need to call a tow. I looked at her then. Really looked. There was irritation there. Not concern, not confusion. Irritation that something wasn't happening the way she expected. I did, I said. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Her gaze flicked to the driver, then back to me. Where are you taking it? Somewhere neutral? That's vague. It's supposed to be. The driver cleared his throat. Ma'am, I just need to finish securing this. Lauren turned to him, annoyed. This is my sister's car. He nodded. And she asked me to move it. Lauren looked back at me. You don't trust me, I considered that. Not with this. The word landed heavier than I intended. Not because it was loud, but because it was final. Her face tightened for a split second before she smoothed it over. You're tired, she said. You've been gone a long time. That's true, I said. And you're reading into things. Also possible. The tow bed tilted. The car rolled slowly upward, the tires making a soft, hollow sound against the metal. Lauren watched it like someone watching luggage disappear at an airport. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be, she said. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to clarify. When the car settled into place, the driver locked it down and handed me a clipboard. I signed without rushing. My hand was steady. Lauren crossed her arms. You're not taking that to the shop near here, are you? Her jaw tightened. You always do this, she said. You make decisions and expect everyone to adjust. I met her eyes. I expect everyone to be safe. That finally cracked something. You think I'd hurt you? I didn't respond. Silence is an answer people hate because they can't argue with it. The driver climbed back into the truck. Ready when you are. I stepped back as the truck pulled away, red lights blinking softly as it turned down the street. The car was gone. The driveway looked wrong without it. Lauren stood there a moment longer, then scoffed. Unbelievable, she said, and went back inside. I stayed where I was until the sound of the engine faded completely. The street returned to its normal rhythm. Someone waved at me from across the way. I waved back. My phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. I walked inside, grabbed my bag, and headed for the guest room. The house felt smaller now, tighter, like it was holding its breath. As I closed the door behind me, I thought about how often people confuse loyalty with silence. How often they assume familiarity equals safety. Military training never leaves you. It just changes where you apply it. The house settled after the tow truck left, the way it always does when a disruption passes, and everyone pretends it didn't mean anything. I dropped my bag on the guest bed and didn't unpack. I sat on the edge of the mattress, boots still on, and listened. Pipes clicked. The HVAC kicked on. Someone laughed softly in the kitchen. Lauren's voice drifted down the hall, bright and normal, like she was hosting a podcast, instead of watching my car disappear. My phone buzzed. I turned it face down. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. I changed into jeans and a hoodie and stepped back outside through the side door. The driveway was empty now, a clean rectangle where the car had been. It looked harmless. That bothered me. Empty spaces invite assumptions. The driver texted me a location pin and a time estimate. I acknowledged it with a single okay and started walking. Not far. Just enough to get away from the house and clear my head. Night came down fast. Streetlights hummed to life. A couple walked their dog. Someone pulled into a driveway with groceries. No one looked at me twice. That was the point. I kept my pace even and my hands loose. The city has a rhythm at night, and when you match it, you disappear into it. I crossed the street, then crossed back, then turned down a block I hadn't planned on. Nothing fancy, just movement without explanation. When my phone buzzed again, I stopped under a light and checked it. "Lauren, where did you take it?" I typed back without emotion. "Somewhere safe." 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. "Lauren, you're overreacting." I slid the phone into my pocket and kept walking. I wasn't interested in winning an argument. I was interested in removing variables. That's how you reduce risk. Fewer unknowns, fewer points of failure. The mechanic's place was on the edge of an industrial strip, where things closed early and reopened late. The driver met me at the gate, tired and efficient. We exchanged a look that said we both preferred things quiet. He unlocked the bay and rolled the car inside without ceremony. Fluorescent lights flickered on. The smell of oil and metal cut through the night air. "You want me to check anything specific?" he asked. "Brakes," I said. "Lines first." He nodded like that was reasonable. "Morning work." "Now," I said. He didn't argue. He didn't ask why. He pulled a stool over and slid under the car flashlight beam, jittering as it moved. I stayed by the wall arms, folded eyes on the floor. Minutes stretched. The kind of minutes where you don't check the clock because you're afraid of what you'll feel when time passes and nothing happens. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. The mechanic rolled out and sat up, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't say anything right away. He looked at the car, then at me. "You didn't drive it," he said. "No," he nodded once. "Good, that was it. No drama, no raised voice. Just confirmation that my decision hadn't been pointless. "What did you see?" I asked. He stood and walked back under, adjusting the light so I could see what he was pointing at. He didn't need to explain much. I'd worked around machines long enough to know the difference between wear and intent. "Clean cut," he said. "Not corrosion, not damage from the road." I crouched and leaned closer. The line wasn't frayed. It wasn't cracked. It was severed. Deliberate. "How long?" I asked. "Recent," he said. "Last day or two." I stood and stepped back, my pulse finally ticking up a notch. Not panic. Recognition. "Can you document it?" I asked. He nodded. "Photos, report, do that." He looked at me for a second. "You want me to call anyone?" "Not yet." He didn't push. He went back to work, methodical and quiet. I watched the process the way I'd watched inspections before. Observe. Verify. Don't jump ahead. When he finished, he handed me a printed report and emailed a copy to an address I gave him. The timestamps were clean. The language was plain. No opinions, just facts. I thanked him and paid in cash. Outside, the night felt sharper. I leaned against the wall and breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, the way you do when your body wants to sprint, but there's nowhere to go. I checked my phone. "Lauren, where are you, Lauren? This is getting ridiculous." "Lauren, call me." I typed one line and stopped. Deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Silence was safer. I sent a message to someone else instead. Short, practical, need advice. Are you awake? The reply came fast. Always. What's going on? I sent the report. No commentary, just the file. There was a pause, longer than before. Then, "You did the right thing." I leaned my head back against the brick and closed my eyes for a second. Relief didn't arrive. Relief comes later if it comes at all. What I felt was alignment. My instincts and the evidence had finally met in the same place. Next steps, I typed. Document everything, came the reply. Don't go back into that house alone. I was already ahead of that. I arranged for the car to stay where it was. The mechanic agreed, locking the bay and handing me a key. I tucked it into my wallet like it belonged there. The walk back felt longer, not because the distance changed, but because the house had. Familiar places don't feel familiar once they've been reclassified as unsafe. Lauren met me in the kitchen when I came in. She was leaning against the counter. Arms crossed, expression carefully neutral. "So," she said. "You done proving a point?" I set my keys down and met her eyes. I wasn't proving anything. she scoffed. You made a whole production, I made a choice, based on what she asked. A feeling I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. You're acting like I tried to hurt you, she said, voice tight now. I studied her face, the irritation, the control, the absence of surprise. I'm acting like I don't trust my car, I said. That's insane. Then it shouldn't bother you. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away first. Dinner's cold, she said. I'm not hungry. She laughed sharp. You always do this. You make everything about control. I picked up my keys. I make things about safety. I left the kitchen and went back to the guest room, closing the door behind me. I sat on the bed and opened the report again, reading it like repetition might soften it. The words stayed the same. Outside the room, the house moved on. Cabinets, plates, television noise, life continuing on the assumption that what's been hidden will stay that way. I placed the report on the nightstand and slid the phone beside it, face up this time. My body finally let the tension rise just enough to remind me what was at stake. I didn't lie down. I didn't turn off the light. I sat there alert and awake in a house that no longer felt like a place you rest. I slept in my clothes and woke up before the alarm I hadn't set. The house was quiet in that early morning way that makes every sound feel louder than it is. I stood stretched once and checked my phone. No new messages. That didn't calm me. It sharpened things. Silence after a disruption usually means people are recalculating. I washed my face, brushed my teeth, and kept my movements minimal. The mirror showed the same person it always did, which helped. I didn't look rattled. I looked like someone with a plan. I left the house without waking anyone and walked until the street opened into the commercial strip. A diner was already open. I slid into a booth by the window, ordered coffee, and took the seat where I could see the door. Old habit. I let the mug warm my hands and stared at nothing in particular. Waiting is the hardest part because it invites doubt. When you're moving, you're solving. When you're waiting, your brain starts offering alternatives you didn't ask for. I let it run its course without agreeing with it. Maybe Lauren didn't mean what I thought. Maybe the cut was unrelated. Maybe I'd turned family friction into a full-blown incident. Then I pictured the line again. Clean, recent, deliberate. That image shut the noise down. My phone buzzed. Not Lauren, the mechanic. Got the photos uploaded, the message read. Let me know if you need anything else. I replied with a thank you and ordered eggs. I didn't really want. Protein is practical, comfort food is for later. While I waited, I pulled up my calendar. Work emails stacked up like they always do. A reminder about a briefing next week. Nothing that said my life was about to tilt. Institutions move slowly, even when individual lives don't. I paid and left, walking back toward the house with my hands in my pockets. The sky was bright now, the kind of morning people post photos of. That contrast felt intentional, like the world was testing whether I'd fall for it. Lauren's car was gone when I reached the driveway. The house looked empty, blinds drawn. A note sat on the kitchen counter in her handwriting, out for a bit. No time, no explanation. That mattered. I grabbed my bag and sat at the table, spreading out what I had. The report, the photos on my phone, timestamps. I didn't add commentary. I didn't speculate. I lined up facts like you do when you want them to speak for themselves. My phone lit up with a call from a number I recognized. I answered. You still safe? The voice asked. For now. Good. Listen, don't confront her again. Don't accuse. Keep it clean. I am. Where are you staying? I looked around the kitchen, the magnets on the fridge, the plant Lauren always forgot to water. Not here. Smart. We talked through options, practical ones, not dramatic. Who to notify. What not to say. What to document next. The call ended without reassurance, which I appreciated. Reassurance is cheap. Clarity isn't. I packed my bag properly this time. Clothes folded, documents in a folder, charger, wallet, keys. I left nothing behind that would require a return visit for convenience. When Lauren came back, it was late afternoon. I heard the garage door and stayed seated. She walked in and froze when she saw me at the table. You're still here, she said. For a minute, I replied. She dropped her purse and crossed her arms. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy. Doing what I slid the folder across the table an inch, not toward her, just enough that she noticed it. What's that? She asked. Maintenance records. She laughed. Too fast. You're really leaning into this. Lean in or lean out, I said. I chose in. She paced once, then stopped. You think you're smarter than me. I think facts matter. Facts can be twisted. Photos are stubborn. Her jaw tightened. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to stay alive. That landed differently. She didn't argue right away. She watched my face like she was checking for tells. You've always been dramatic, she said finally. I've always been careful. Careful would be talking to me. I am. She shook her head. You don't get to blow up my life over a misunderstanding. I didn't blow up anything. Yet, she said. There it was, not denial. Projection. I stood and zipped my bag. I'm leaving. We're somewhere neutral, she scoffed. You can't just run every time something makes you uncomfortable. I'm not running. Then what is this distance? She stepped closer. You're acting like I'm dangerous. I met her eyes. I'm acting like I don't know you. That was the first time she looked genuinely offended. Not angry, wounded. It was an effective look. It just came too late. Give me the folder, she said. No, you're accusing me of something serious. I'm preserving information. She reached for it. I moved it out of reach without raising my voice. Don't, I said. Her hand stopped midair. She pulled it back and laughed again, louder this time. You're unbelievable. I know, I said. I walked past her toward the door. She followed, talking faster now, sentences overlapping. You think you're better than us because you wear a uniform. You think rules protect you. Rules protect everyone, I said, opening the door. Not when people get hurt. I'm trying to prevent that. She stood on the porch as I stepped down, her voice carrying. If you leave like this, don't come back. I paused long enough to turn. That was already on the table. I didn't wait for a response. I loaded my bag into the car I'd arranged that morning and pulled away, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror. I didn't feel relief. I felt space. Enough to think. At the hotel, I checked in under my name and asked for a room away from the elevator. The clerk nodded like this was normal, which it should be. I locked the door behind me and set the folder on the desk, opening it again. Waiting is worse than fear, because fear tells you where to look. Waiting asks you to trust that you're looking in the right place. I made a short list on the hotel notepad. Not of accusations, of actions. Who I'd already told. What I'd documented. What still needed verification. I crossed off nothing. My phone buzzed. Lauren again. A missed call. Then another. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, letting the hum of the air conditioner settle into the background. The truth doesn't arrive with noise. It accumulates. The hotel room smelled like detergent and old carpet, which was fine. Neutral places help you think. I set the folder on the desk, opened my laptop, and pulled the photos up full screen. Same cut, same angle, same clean line. I didn't zoom in anymore. I didn't need to. The evidence had stopped changing. Only my understanding of it was catching up. My phone buzzed. Not Lauren, a different number. You free to talk, the text said. I called back immediately. I am. The voice on the other end was calm, precise. I reviewed what you sent. That's not failure. That's tampering. I know. Anyone else touched the car? No. Good. Keep it that way. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. Hearing it said out loud didn't add drama. It stripped it away. What was left was a fact that didn't care about family dynamics or feelings. How sure, I asked. Enough that I'd put my name on it. I closed my eyes for a second. Not to steady myself, to mark the moment. Once something gets a name, you don't get to pretend it's anything else. Document the chain, he said. Times, locations, who had access. I've started. Finish. And don't give anyone a heads up. I won't. The call ended without small talk. I appreciated that. I pulled the notepad closer and added to the list. Who knew my schedule? Who had keys? Who knew I'd be driving this weekend? It wasn't a long list. That was the problem. Lauren's name sat at the center, whether I wrote it down or not. I showered, changed, and left the room with the folder under my arm. The mechanic's shop was already open when I arrived. He didn't look surprised to see me. He waved me back and kept working while he talked. You want a second look? He asked. I want you to explain it like you would to someone who thinks this was an accident. He slid out from under the car and wiped his hands. Then they're wrong. He pointed again, this time slower. See the cut straight through. No tear marks, no heat damage. You don't get that from wear. How long would it take? I asked. Couple minutes. Less if you know what you're doing. Tool cutter, cheap, hardware store. I nodded and wrote it down. Not because I needed to remember, but because writing keeps things from floating away. You drive it? He asked. No. He nodded. Then you did the smartest thing possible. Can you put that in writing? He smiled without humor. Already did. He handed me an updated report with his credentials at the top and a clear conclusion at the bottom. No adjectives, no speculation, just what was and what wasn't. I thanked him again and left the weight in my bag heavier than paper should be. Back in the car, I didn't turn the radio on. I let the road noise fill the space. Every stoplight felt longer. Not because I was anxious, but because my brain kept replaying the same calculation from different angles, hoping one of them would soften it. None did. At a red light, my phone rang. Lauren. I let it ring. It rang again. Then a text. Lauren, this is getting out of hand. I typed back one line and stopped. Deleted it. I wasn't interested in managing her emotions anymore. Another text came through. Lauren, you're making me look bad. There it was, not concern. Optics. I drove to a quiet park and sat in the car with the engine off. I opened the folder and read the report one more time, like repetition might dull it. It didn't. I called the number I'd been avoiding. You have a minute, I asked when the line picked up. I do now, she said. I need to report something. She didn't interrupt. She asked where I was, who I'd told, and whether the vehicle was secured. She asked about timelines and access, and whether I'd been threatened directly. I heard a statement, I said. Not explicit, but consistent. That matters, she said. So does the physical evidence. What happens next, I asked. Process, she said. Slow, uncomfortable, necessary. I pictured Lauren's face when process entered the room. The irritation would shift. Control always resists being shared. Anything I shouldn't do, I asked. Don't confront, don't explain, don't negotiate. I wasn't planning to. Good. The call ended and the park stayed quiet around me. A man jogged past, a kid chased a ball. Normal scenes layered over something that was no longer abstract. I drove back to the hotel and dropped the bag on the desk again. This time I organized it. Reports in one section, photos labeled and dated, messages exported. I sent copies to a secure address and printed a second set. Lauren called twice while I worked. I didn't answer. At dusk, there was a knock on the door. I checked the peephole. Front desk. Package for you, the clerk said. I opened the door a crack and took the envelope. Inside was a copy of a receipt. Hardware store, Cutter, purchased 2 days earlier. The name wasn't on it, but the location was close to Lauren's route home. I sat on the bed and stared at the paper. This wasn't luck. This was momentum. My phone buzzed again. Lauren, I'm coming over, I typed quickly this time. Don't, she replied just as fast. Lauren. You don't get to shut me out. I set the phone down and locked the door. The air in the room felt tighter, like it does before a storm that hasn't decided where it's going to break. I lined the new receipt up with the rest of the documents and took a photo of the arrangement timestamp visible. The evidence wasn't dramatic. It was cumulative. That's what made it dangerous. I sat back in the chair and let my shoulders drop an inch. Not relief, readiness. There's a difference. Outside the parking lot, lights flicked on one by one. Cars came and went. Somewhere nearby, a siren wailed and faded. I checked the door lock again without standing up. The mechanic didn't have to say much because the truth had already learned how to speak for itself. I woke before dawn again, not because I was anxious, but because my body had switched into a mode that doesn't wait for permission. I sat up, feet on the floor, and took inventory. Phone, wallet, folder, keys, everything where I left it. Control doesn't fix problems, but it reduces surprises. The first call of the day wasn't to family. It was to a number I hadn't dialed in years. She answered on the third ring. Emily. Martha, I said. I need guidance. There was a pause, not hesitation, just recalibration. You sound like this matters. It does. Talk. I gave her the version that survives scrutiny. Times, actions, evidence. No emotion, no assumptions. When I finished, she didn't respond right away. You understand what this touches, she said finally. I do. As active duty, this can trigger reviews you didn't ask for. I know. Clearance, fitness, judgment, I know. And you're still calling me? Yes. She exhaled. Then listen carefully. You don't editorialize. You don't speculate. You report exactly what you know and how you know it. You do not frame this as family conflict. I wasn't planning to. Good, because the moment it becomes drama, you lose control of the narrative. Control. That word again. It meant something different here. Not dominance. Structure. I'll send you a checklist, she said. Follow it. And Emily, don't go alone to talk to anyone about this. I won't. When the call ended, I stayed seated for a moment, hands resting on my thighs, letting the weight settle where it belonged. Reporting wasn't a button you press. It's a door you walk through knowing it might lock behind you. I showered, dressed, and laid the uniform out on the bed without putting it on. Not yet. I wanted my head clear before the symbol came with me. The drive to the office was quiet. Commuters, coffee cups, stop and go. I parked, took the folder, and walked in like I had 100 times before. Same badge, same nods, same neutral expressions. Inside, the air felt different. Not hostile, observant. I checked in and waited. No one rushed me. No one smiled too much. Professional distance is a language I speak fluently. The room I was led into had no windows and too many chairs, a table, a notepad, a recorder that wasn't on yet, 2 people I recognized and 1 I didn't. State your name and roll, the woman across from me said. I did. Why are you here? I opened the folder and slid it across the table. To report vehicle tampering that presents a credible threat. They didn't flinch. That mattered. We went through it step by step. What I heard, what I saw, what I did. Why I did it. Who I contacted. What evidence existed. I answered questions the way I'd been trained to answer questions directly. Without padding, without defensiveness. At one point, the man to my left asked, "Why not confront the person you suspect?" "Because confrontation increases risk," I said. "Evidence reduces it." He wrote that down. They asked about stress, sleep, judgment, whether I felt threatened now, whether I believed this affected my ability to serve. I didn't minimize, I didn't dramatize. I believe it requires boundaries, I said, not withdrawal. The woman nodded once. That's a reasonable distinction. When the recorder clicked off, no one offered reassurance. That was fine. Reassurance isn't policy. We'll take it from here, she said. You'll be advised on next steps. I stood, thanked them, and left without asking how long that would take. Timelines belong to institutions. Individuals adapt. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. The parking lot buzzed with movement. Life didn't pause for process. My phone buzzed as I reached the car. Lauren. You went to them, didn't you? I didn't respond. Another message came through. Lauren. You're really doing this. I started the engine and pulled out, keeping my eyes forward. If she knew, it wasn't because I'd told her. Information travels fast when people feel exposed. I drove back to the hotel and packed again, this time with intention. Not fleeing, repositioning. I checked out and asked for a receipt. Paper trails matter. At the new place, I chose a room facing the courtyard. Fewer blind spots. I set the folder in the safe and locked it, then photographed the contents and emailed the images to the same secure address as before. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. Emily Carter, a man said when I answered. This is Detective Rowe. Yes, we're following up on a report involving your vehicle. I expected that. Are you in a safe location? Yes, we'd like to ask you some questions. Now, today, where he named a place. Public, neutral, good. I agreed and hung up, feeling the shift settle in. This was no longer contained to one system. Parallel tracks were forming. That happens when facts are sturdy. At the cafe, Detective Rowe arrived with a notebook and no small talk. We covered the same ground as before, but from a different angle. Civil, criminal, intent, access, opportunity. Do you believe your sister intended to cause you harm? He asked. I believe she took action that would have caused harm if I hadn't intervened. He nodded and wrote, That's precise. Precision keeps you out of trouble. When we finished, he thanked me and stood. If you think of anything else, call. I will. Outside, my phone buzzed again. Lauren, this time with a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Voices can wait. Records don't change. I sat in the car for a moment, hands on the wheel, and watched people move past the windshield. No one knew what lanes had just opened under my feet. Reporting the truth always costs something. Comfort, illusions, sometimes careers. I drove back to the hotel and stood under the awning while rain started to fall, light at first, then steadier. I didn't step inside right away. I let the cold water hit my jacket and darken the fabric. I hadn't lost anything yet. I just stopped pretending there was nothing to lose. The rain stopped the way it always does, without asking whether anything had been resolved. I shook the water off my jacket in the hotel entryway and rode the elevator up alone. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaner and coffee. Neutral again. I liked neutral. It didn't pretend to be comforting. Inside the room, I opened the safe and took the folder out, then set it on the desk and added one more page to the stack, a brief note of who I'd spoken to where and when. No adjectives, no conclusions, just a timeline that didn't care who it implicated. My phone vibrated, a missed call, then another, Lauren again. I set the phone face down and finished writing. Family drama has a way of expanding once it senses attention. It pulls in spectators, sympathizers, people who want to help by smoothing things over. I wasn't interested in smoothing anything. I left the room and walked to the lobby to grab a bottle of water. On the way back, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Diane, call me. I didn't call. I texted back instead. Emily, I'm safe. I'm handling it. A minute later, Aunt Diane. This doesn't need to be public. That was the first time someone framed it that way. Public. As if secrecy were a courtesy owed to the person who created the risk. Emily. I'm not making it public. No response. Back in the room, I sat at the desk and opened my email. There was a message from a neighbor, someone who lived 2 houses down from Lauren. We'd exchanged addresses once after a storm knocked power out. Subject. Quick question, inside a single line. Did you move your car the other night? I saw a tow truck. I stared at the screen, then replied. Emily, yes, maintenance issue. The reply came fast. Neighbor? Thought so, just checking. I didn't ask what else she'd seen. Questions invite stories. I wanted facts to come to me on their own. An hour later, a second email arrived from the same neighbor. Neighbor. Not my business, but your sister was in the garage late that night. Tools out, door half open. I didn't respond right away. I added the email to the folder, printed it, and wrote the time at the top. Then I replied with a thank you and nothing else. The day stretched on slow and heavy. I ate when my watch said it was time. I drank water. I walked the courtyard twice. Routine anchors you when the ground keeps shifting. Late afternoon, there was another message. This time from Lauren's husband. Mark, can we talk? I read it twice. He'd never contacted me directly before. Emily. What about the typing bubble appeared, disappeared, reappeared? Mark, Lauren's upset. She says you're accusing her of something serious. Emily. I'm documenting a safety issue. A pause. Mark. She said you're stressed from work. Emily's stress doesn't cut brake lines. The bubble vanished. I didn't push. If he wanted to talk, he'd talk. An hour later, my phone rang. Mark again. I answered. I don't know what's going on, he said without preamble. But the police came by the house. Yes. They asked about tools, about receipts. Yes. She says you're trying to ruin her. I let that sit for a beat. I'm trying to stay alive. Silence. Then a breath. She wouldn't. I'm not asking you to decide, I said. I'm asking you to tell the truth if you're asked. Another pause. Longer this time. I saw a cutter in the garage, he said. Didn't think anything of it. When night before you left, I wrote it down. Mark, he said, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to make sure facts don't get buried. He exhaled. What do you need from me? Nothing right now. That's it. That's it. When the call ended, I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling fan. It ticked softly as it spun. Small sounds become louder when you stop ignoring them. Family doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes it means proximity to the person most capable of rationalizing harm. My phone buzzed again. Lauren, this time with a different tone. Lauren. You're tearing everyone apart. Emily. I'm documenting events. Lauren, you could stop this. Emily. I stopped one thing already. No reply. As evening settled in, messages came in waves. Cousins and an old family friend. People asking if I was okay in a way that meant, please say this is a misunderstanding so we can go back to normal. I answered selectively. Emily, I'm safe. Please don't speculate. Some complied, some didn't. One message stood out. Mom's friend Carol Lauren says you're unstable, that you imagined the whole thing. I read it once, then archived it. Accusations don't need airtime. At dusk, Detective Rowe called. We spoke with your neighbor, he said, and your brother-in-law. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not relief, focus. Anything new, I asked. Enough to keep moving, that's good. Also, he added, we obtained store footage. I didn't ask which store. I already knew. After the call, I stood and stretched, rolling my shoulders. The day had been about accumulation, not one dramatic reveal. A series of small confirmations stacking into something solid. I took the folder back out and reorganized it. Emails printed. calls logged, times aligned. The story was writing itself without my help. Outside, someone laughed in the courtyard. A door slammed. Life unbothered. My phone buzzed once more. A voicemail notification from Lauren. I didn't play it. Words change, records don't. I set the phone down and turned the lamp off, leaving the room lit by the city glow through the window. The light was enough to see by without pretending everything was bright. Family drama thrives on noise. Evidence thrives on patience. I stayed seated, hands folded, letting the quiet do its work. The first thing that changed was Lauren's tone. Not louder, not softer, different. I noticed it in the spacing between messages, the way questions replaced statements, the way certainty gave way to pressure. People who feel in control don't ask, they declare. People who are losing it start fishing. My phone buzzed while I was lacing my shoes. Lauren. We need to talk in person. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, Lauren. This is getting misunderstood. Still nothing from me. I went downstairs, grabbed coffee from the lobby, and took it outside. The air was cool, the kind that clears your head without trying. I sat on a low wall and watched a delivery truck back into place, slow and careful. Precision beats speed, every time. Another message came through. Lauren, I'm trying to fix this. That word again, fix. As if the problem were the conversation, not the action. I sipped the coffee and let the phone sit. By mid-morning, she tried a different angle. Lauren, Mark is really upset. You're putting him in the middle. That one almost worked. Almost. Family pressure is efficient when it's shared. Emily. I didn't put him anywhere. No reply. I finished the coffee, went back upstairs, and opened the folder. I wasn't adding anything new. I was reviewing what was already there, the way you do before you walk into a room where people expect you to explain yourself. You don't rehearse speeches. You memorize facts. A knock came at the door. I checked the peephole. Mark. I didn't open it right away. I slid the folder into the safe and locked it. Then I opened the door a few inches, chain on. Hey, he said, eyes tired. Can we talk? Here is fine, I said. He nodded, shifting his weight. She's spiraling, I'm aware. She thinks you're trying to make her look like a criminal. I'm documenting what happened. He sighed. She says you heard something wrong. I heard enough. She keeps saying you're cold, that you don't care about the fallout. I looked at him. I care about staying alive. That stopped him. Not because it was dramatic, but because it didn't leave room for interpretation. She didn't mean he started. I'm not asking you to finish that sentence, I said. He rubbed his face. The police asked about the cutter, about receipts, about when she was in the garage. Yes, they showed me the footage. I didn't react. I didn't need to. She paid cash, he said. Different register. I nodded once. Thank you for telling me. That's it, he asked. You're not going to say anything else, no? He stared at me, searching for something, anger, satisfaction, forgiveness. He didn't find it. I don't know what to do, he said quietly. That makes two of us, I said, but we know what not to do. He looked down the hallway, then back at me. She's going to try to talk to you again. I know. She thinks if she can explain it right, I'm not accepting explanations. He nodded slow. Okay. When he left, I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it for a second. Not weakness, just acknowledgement. The phone buzzed as if on cue. Lauren. I know you're talking to Mark. Emily. He contacted me. Lauren. He shouldn't be involved. Emily. Then he shouldn't have been around the tools. That set her off. Lauren. You're twisting everything. You always do this. You disappear, then come back and judge. Emily. I came back and listened. Lauren. You don't even know what you heard. Emily. I know what I did after. Lauren. You think silence makes you right, Emily. Silence keeps things from getting worse. The typing bubble flickered for a long time. Lauren. You could still stop this. I stood by the window and watched someone water the courtyard plants, methodical and unbothered. Emily. I already stopped something. No reply. An hour later, she showed up anyway. The front desk called my room. There's someone here asking for you. Do they have a name? I asked. Yes. Your sister. Tell her I'm unavailable. There was a pause. She's insisting. I'm still unavailable. The line went dead. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Yes, Emily, it's Officer Chen. Your sister is downstairs. She's upset. I understand. She says you're refusing to talk to her. That's correct. We can ask her to leave. Please. Another pause. Done. I hung up and stayed where I was. I didn't move toward the door. I didn't watch through the window. I didn't need the visual. The realization came later quietly. Lauren wasn't trying to explain anymore. She was trying to interrupt, to create noise, to force engagement. That's how you know someone's out of moves. By afternoon, messages shifted again. Shorter, sharper. Lauren. You think you've won, Emily. This isn't a game. Lauren, you're enjoying this. Emily, I'm documenting it. Lauren. Say that again when you've ruined your career. I took a screenshot and added it to the folder. An email came in from Detective Rowe, brief and procedural. A follow-up scheduled. No commentary. I replied with availability and nothing else. As the day wound down, I went for a walk. Not to clear my head, to keep my body in rhythm. I passed shops, traffic, people arguing about nothing important. The ordinary kept things proportional. When I got back, there was a final message waiting. Lauren. I never thought you'd go this far. I read it once. Emily. I went far enough. I set the phone down and didn't pick it up again. People assume confrontation is the point of conflict. It isn't. The point is leverage. Once you stop playing along, the other side has to show what they were counting on. Lauren had counted on familiarity, on my reluctance to make things formal, on my instinct to smooth things over. She was adjusting to the fact that none of that was available anymore. I sat at the desk, opened the folder one last time that night, and checked the order. Everything was where it should be. The room felt quiet in a different way now, not tense, clear. I turned off the lamp and lay back, eyes open, letting the ceiling come into focus. There was no satisfaction in this stage, just recognition. I wasn't participating anymore, and that changed the math. The meeting room had bad coffee and good acoustics. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the people, not the flags on the wall, the sound. Every movement carried. Every word landed where it was supposed to. I took the chair I was offered and set my hands on the table, palms down. No folder this time. They already had copies. When evidence is solid, you don't need to carry it around like a shield. Lauren sat across from me, flanked by a lawyer who kept glancing at his watch like he'd rather be anywhere else. She didn't look at me. She looked past me at the middle distance, the way people do when they want to look composed without committing to eye contact. The officer running the meeting spoke first. Calm, procedural, names, roles, purpose. This is not a debate, he said. It's a review. Lauren's lawyer nodded. Lauren crossed her arms. I wasn't asked to speak right away. That was fine. Silence is useful when other people are eager to fill it. The questions came in an order that made sense. Timeline, access, location, tools, receipts, statements. I answered when I was asked and stopped when I finished. No clarifying flourishes. No emphasis. At one point, Lauren interjected. She's exaggerating, she said. She didn't even drive the car. That's correct, the officer said. Because she arranged a tow. Lauren turned to him. Based on a misunderstanding. He didn't respond to that. He turned back to his notes. The mechanic's report was read into the record. Not dramatically, just enough to establish fact. The word deliberate appeared once. That was enough. Lauren shifted in her chair. The officer looked up. Ms. Mitchell, do you dispute purchasing a cutter at the location listed here? Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Lauren shook her head. I don't remember, she said. The officer nodded and moved on. Do you dispute being in the garage during the time frame indicated by the neighbor's statement, I go into the garage all the time? Do you dispute using tools in the garage that evening? She hesitated. That hesitation hung in the room longer than any answer would have. I fix things, she said finally. The officer wrote something down. No one looked at me. I appreciated that. When the truth is doing its job, you don't interrupt it. Lauren's lawyer cleared his throat. My client maintains there was no intent to cause harm. The officer looked up. Intent is not the only factor we consider. Lauren leaned forward. You're making this sound worse than it is. The officer didn't change his tone. We're describing what happened. That distinction mattered. I was asked a single question that required more than yes or no. Ms. Carter, did you feel threatened? I answered honestly. I felt that driving the vehicle would have put me at risk. And your response, I removed the risk. That went into the notes. The meeting ended without anyone raising their voice. No gavel, no declaration. Just instructions, next steps, contact points, boundaries. Lauren stood before I did. She brushed past my chair without touching it and headed for the door. Heels sharp against the floor. I waited until she was gone before standing. Outside, the air felt lighter, not because anything was resolved, but because something had been named. My phone buzzed as I walked to the car. A message from my unit, brief, administrative, nothing alarming. I replied with a confirmation and put the phone away. At the curb, Lauren was waiting. She stepped into my path, eyes bright with something between anger and disbelief. "You didn't even look at me in there. There was nothing to look at," I said. "You let them talk like I'm dangerous. They talked about facts. You could have said something." I did. When I arranged the tow." She laughed short and sharp. "You think you're clever. I think I'm alive." She stared at me like she was trying to decide which version of me she was dealing with. The one she grew up with, or the one sitting in front of her now. "You've always been like this," she said. "Cold, distant. I've always been careful enough to throw me under the bus." I shook my head, careful enough to step out of the way. Her phone rang. She ignored it. "You think this is over? I think it's documented," she scoffed. "You don't get to decide how this ends." I didn't decide how it started either. That landed, not like a punch, like a weight. She leaned closer. "You're going to regret this." I met her eyes. "Threats don't help your position." She pulled back like she'd touched something hot. "You're unbelievable, I've heard that." I walked around her and got into the car. I didn't look back. Mirrors are for driving, not dwelling. On the way back to the hotel, my phone lit up again. A message from Mark. "Mark, they called me. Asked more questions." "Emily, tell the truth." "Mark, I did. That was all." At the hotel, I packed again. Not because I was leaving town, but because staying flexible matters when processes start overlapping. I left the folder in the safe and took only copies with me. Downstairs, the clerk nodded as I passed. Familiar faces make places feel less temporary. I walked outside and sat on a bench near the entrance, watching cars come and go. The sky was clear. The day had moved on without waiting for permission. My phone buzzed one more time. Lauren, you think you won?" I typed a response and erased it. Typed another, erased that too. I didn't need the last word. The thing about keeping your voice down is that people have to lean in to hear you. They can't accuse you of shouting. They can't say you lost control. I stood and went back inside, the automatic doors sliding shut behind me. The sound was soft, final enough without pretending to be dramatic. I never raised my voice. I didn't have to. I woke to sunlight cutting across the hotel room in a thin line that landed right on the desk. The folder was still there, exactly where I'd left it. No new messages, no missed calls. That mattered more than I expected. I showered, dressed, and packed without rushing. Packing is honest work. You decide what stays, what goes, and what you don't need to touch again. I left the copies in the safe for now and took the originals with me, the weight familiar, manageable. At the front desk, the clerk asked if everything had been okay with my stay. I said yes. It was true. The room had done its job. Outside, the air felt lighter, not forgiving, just clear. I got into the car and drove without music, letting the road noise fill the space. My phone stayed face down in the cup holder. If something needed my attention, it would ring. It didn't. I stopped at a small cafe I hadn't been to before and ordered breakfast. Eggs, toast, black coffee. Nothing fancy. I took a seat by the window and watched people move past with the confidence of those whose days weren't being audited. While I ate, I checked my email. One message stood out. Brief, official, neutral language. Boundaries confirmed. Procedures ongoing. No action required from me at this time. That sentence did more than any speech could have. I replied with acknowledgement and closed the laptop. The rest of the morning unfolded in small practical steps. I returned the rental car. I confirmed my travel plans. I called my unit and gave a simple update that didn't invite questions. Work doesn't need drama to function. When my phone rang, I answered without checking the screen. "Emily," Martha said. "You holding up?" "I am." "Good, that's all I needed to know." She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't ask what I'd lost. People who've seen this kind of thing know better than to frame it that way. After the call, I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel and let the stillness settle. There was no surge of relief, no triumph, just a steady sense that the ground under me was solid again. Lauren didn't call. Neither did anyone else from the family. That was fine. I drove out of town mid-afternoon, the skyline shrinking behind me, familiar exits past, then unfamiliar ones. Distance does something important. It doesn't erase what happened, but it gives it boundaries. At a rest stop, I pulled over and stretched my legs. The place smelled like gasoline and pine trees. A couple argued quietly near the vending machines. A kid dropped a soda and cried. Ordinary problems. I stood there longer than necessary, letting the ordinariness wash over me. When I got back in the car, there was a voicemail waiting. Lauren's number. I didn't play it. I saved it and moved on. I reached my place by evening. The door opened to a space that was mine and only mine. No shared history in the walls, no expectations waiting on the counter. I set the folder on the table and opened it one last time, checking that nothing had shifted. Everything was still in order. I closed it, slid it into the drawer, and locked it. Then I did something I hadn't done in days. I sat down without scanning the room. The quiet was different here, not tense, earned. I cooked a simple dinner and ate standing up, then moved to the couch and stretched out, boots off shoulders, finally dropping a fraction. The TV stayed off. I didn't need distraction. I needed space. My phone buzzed once. Mark. I'm staying at my brother's for a while. Emily. That's a good choice, Mark. I'm sorry, I read that message twice. Not because I needed it, but because it existed. Accountability shows up quietly if it shows up at all. Emily. Take care of yourself. That was the end of the exchange. Later, I went out onto the balcony and watched the lights along the road blink on in sequence. Cars moved steadily, each one going somewhere specific, even if the driver wasn't thinking about it that way. I thought about the house I'd left, the driveway, the empty rectangle where my car had been. I thought about how easy it is to confuse familiarity with safety and how long it can take to notice the difference. I didn't miss the arguments. I didn't miss the explanations. I didn't miss the feeling of being managed. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with applause or closure. It came with quiet decisions stacked one on top of another until staying stopped making sense. I checked my phone one last time before setting it on the table. No new messages, no emergencies, just the date and time steady and indifferent. I turned the light off and let the room go dark, the city glow filtering in through the glass. My body felt tired in a clean way, like it does after you finish something difficult without cutting corners. There's a version of the story where people reconcile, where explanations smooth everything over and everyone agrees to pretend nothing happened. This wasn't that version. This was the one where I chose distance over denial, documentation over drama, and safety over sentiment. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, breathing evenly, the quiet holding. Walking away wasn't the loudest choice. It was the one that worked. 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 It was the one that worked.